We're here today to talk about the arrest of Noah Rios, a 28-year-old man from Fresno who was recently found to be involved in 7 shootings that recently happened in the city of Fresno, just over a span of less than about 7 days. So Mr. Rios, he Fresno resident, he was involved in murder back on January 1st, 2023. He was convicted of being an accessory to murder and sentenced to 36 months. The murder involved a family member. He was not the shooter. However, the victim was in the car with a 4-year-old child, or rather a 6-year-old child, when the murder happened. It was extremely violent. Therefore, he was sentenced to 36 months. For that, he was out in less than a year, and that was on July. In July, he was out after serving less than a year. In less than 13 days after his release from prison, Mr. Rios got involved in his first shooting here in Fresno. That happened on July 28th, in which he shot up a house that he believed belonged to an acquaintance that an acquaintance had visited. Inside that house was a 4-year-old child that he showed utter disregard for. A few days later, on August 4th, he shot up a house that he believed his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend had visited. Completely unknown residents. Thankfully, nobody was hurt in that shooting. A few days later, near Fresno State, Noah Rios shot up a car because it passed by his apartment twice. And unbelievably, nobody was injured in that, and there were some youngsters that were just in town from Madera visiting, trying to have a good time. They were not in any way connected to Rios or other criminal activity. Thank goodness none of them were hurt. On September 2nd, this is another very appalling event near Shaw in Fresno. A gentleman here, a resident of Fresno, who's an amputee and uses a wheelchair. Rios mistakenly identified him as a potential enemy and shot him with a rifle. He's still in the hospital fighting very serious injuries. Just 22 minutes later, after that shooting, he randomly shot up a residence completely across town in the northwest area of Fresno. And luckily, that was also with a rifle and nobody was injured. Just 2 days later, on the 4th of September, he fired 11 rounds into his own family's house of his mother and his sister because he was angry at them for writing victim impact statements in relation to the case that he was convicted on for accessory to murder. Just 15 minutes later, after shooting up his family's house, he committed a robbery at the Chestnut and Clinton Fast Trip, where he fired shots, and thankfully, again, no clerk, no customers were injured there. Later that day, our detectives here of the felony assault unit arrested Noah Rios, bringing his rampage to a halt and exposing him to with the crimes that he's being charged with, up to 237 years in prison to life. I want to first just talk about Noah Rios had a 12-page rap sheet. He's 28 years old. He was sentenced to 36 months, but he only served less than a year for that. And again, just a few short days after getting out of prison, he was committing violence on the streets in Fresno. And that's not something that we expect our residents to tolerate, and that here in the Fresno Police Department we're going to accept. These detectives, when they get these types of calls, whether they're at home, whether they're at work, they drop everything to respond and follow up. Thanks to video, ballistic evidence, and witnesses, they were able to identify Rios within such a short amount of time and take him into custody. During a search warrant of his residence, the SKS-style rifle he had used in 4 of the shootings was recovered, and another handgun still remains outstanding. Noah Rios was, obviously, as I mentioned, a convicted felon and should not have been in possession of those firearms. We don't know how he came to be in possession of those. So I will say this year our numbers for shootings in Fresno are an improvement over last year, although last year showed huge reductions. Right now we're down 41% year-to-date in shootings under last year. And gunshot wound victims, and this is important to us. This year to date we have 74 gunshot wound victims in the city. Last year at this time we had 102, and it's about a 25% reduction, but that is a number of families that didn't have to deal with a loved one being injured. Perhaps sometimes even though someone survives, they suffer lifelong injuries and it impacts their life forever. So we're very proud of the fact that we were able to reduce those shootings in Fresno, but it certainly doesn't come without a lot of sacrifice and hard work by our detectives and what they're able to put together to bring these cases before the district attorney's office. And I think that's all that I have right now, and I'll be glad to take questions.
Chief, isn't it kind of, I think it's disturbing that this guy was when he was arrested and went to court and was convicted and he was out so quickly, and then we see what his, say a rampage caused throughout the city.
Yes.
I mean, is it frustrating that, you're supposed to serve 3 years in prison and you're out in less than half a year?
Yes, it's very frustrating to us. It feels like the victims involved in this, some of them were gunshot wound victims, but the fear that they experienced and will probably continue to experience as a result of this isn't acceptable. It's not acceptable to us.
And obviously the circle of people that were affected just by his actions. I mean, it's not only our community, but his family members as well, right?
Yes, he was random individuals, known individuals, family. He was indiscriminate in who he chose to fire his firearm at.
Chief, he was sentenced to 36 months, served less than a year. Explain that. How does that happen?
Those are credits that he earned in the California prison system. It's not anything to do with our district attorney's office or us. It's just a credit system that has been devised by the California prison system.
And what does that say for the need for rehabilitation, right? Because it's, that is supposed to be an aspect of serving prison time, even in county jail. Is there a greater need for rehabilitation when they're in there?
There's a need for incarceration and rehabilitation. I think they go hand in hand. We seem to have sort of skipped the incarceration part, and I'm not sure how robust the services are for the rehabilitation, but clearly Noah Rios wasn't rehabilitated and got out from incarceration way too early.
And this string of events, how did you tie them all together through the investigation?
First of all, some ballistic evidence that the detectives developed, video. They're very aggressive about canvassing for video and wherever we can find it and piece things together, and then witness statements. Since he was all over the city all different times, there were witnesses that we were able to locate.
And my last question for you, Chief, can you explain what we're looking at? It looks like a gun and some sort of vest.
Yes, actually, during the service of the search warrant at his residence, not only was that SKS-style rifle, and that fires 7.62 rounds, are very powerful. They can rip through, obviously, residents, vehicles, so forth. That was the firearm recovered, and then along with that ballistic vest, and we're not sure what the origin of that vest was, how he came to be in possession of it, just like the firearms.
Thank you.
Is that illegal to have here in California, that specific firearm?
I don't know the answer to that. Do any of you? I don't. We can get back to you with that information. The firearms laws change kind of regularly, so it's something we need to be precise on.
The other question, just to reiterate, he got 36 months for an accessory to murder conviction?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, he did not fire shots, but he was definitely a part of that murder, a very brutal murder in front of a 6-year-old child. And let me say, regardless of the legality of that particular weapon, it was not legal for him to possess, being a convicted felon.
And there's still an investigation into how he obtained that.
Oh, we will be looking at that. That it will be a little more difficult to bear fruit, but certainly something we'll pursue that avenue.
Chief, safe to say that you guys have to be extremely proud that you were able to get him off the streets, because it really sounded like it was by sheer stroke of luck that we didn't have more chaos caused by this individual.
Well, stroke of luck that more victims weren't injured for sure, especially using the kind of weaponry that he did for the shootings with that rifle. And yeah, absolutely a stroke of luck that more people weren't hurt. Not a stroke of luck that they were able to locate and arrest him. That's through hard work.
Where did the arrest occur at?
At the county probation office. He is on probation as a result of his conviction, and he was checking in.
What is he facing now? I know you had kind of said that.
Yeah, 237 years exposure in prison, 237 to life to be exact.
Has he been interviewed? Has he said anything about these string of events?
Detectives were able to speak with him briefly, yeah. And yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the witnesses, just another, to show the depth of his depravity, essentially, he laughed about shooting the individual in the wheelchair, which is just appalling and is difficult to understand any of that mentality. Thank you very much for coming. Our goal is to not only just reduce violent crime, but fear of violent crime in the city of Fresno. And although this was a pretty scary case, we wanted to make sure to reassure the community that we are on top of this. And obviously we spare no expense. These individuals behind me are the best of the best in this department, and they will continue to relentlessly pursue suspects that bring this crime and fear to our community. So thank you all.
Hi, I'm Monty Torres with Fox 26 News on YouTube. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel, where we have loads of great content for you to choose from. And while you're here, why not click on the subscribe button right here? That way you can stay in touch with all the latest breaking news, everything news related within the Central Valley. And thank you for watching.